There? No. My synagogue is still around where I had my bar mitzvah. Whatever that's worth. Okay, let's begin page 147, Shochenad. Shochenad maron v'kadosh shemo.
V'fi sharim tis halal, uv'divrei tzadikim tis barach, uvilshon chasidim tis ramam, uv'kerev kedoshim tis kadash.
Umakalot rivavot amcha beYisrael, v'rini parashim chamakenu b'chodor v'adosh. Lehader levarech, lehalel v'kales l'klivrei shirav v'tishbechot.
Lehodos, lehalel, leshabeach, lefaer, leramem, lehader, levarech, lehalel, kales, al kol divrei shiras, shiras v'sishbechos David, ben Yishai, abdecha meshichecha. Yishtabach shimcha l'Admokeinu.
Ha'el ha'melech ha'gadol ha'kadosh b'shamayim u'va'aretz. Tilav tiferet v'malchut barachot v'odam nitzaved la'olam. Baruch atah Adonai ha'melech v'tishbachot.
Brachos v'hodos me'ata ve'ad olam. Baruch atah Adonai El melech gadol batishbachos, El hahodos Adonai niflas, Habacher v'shirei zimra, Melech El cheholamim.
Rise, Chatzi Kaddish.
Yiskadav, Yiskadash, Shemei Rabbah.
Amen.
Yama divrach Yiruseh Yamlich Malchuseh, B'chayechon of Yomechon of Chayeducho Beis Yisrael, B'agalav Isman Kariv, V'imru. Amen. Yehi Shmei Rabbah Mavarach, L'olam Yamayah. Yisbarach, V'ishtabach, V'isba'ar, V'isroman, V'yisnaseh, V'yis hadar, v'yis ale, v'yis halal, shemei dekusha, b'rechu. Leila minko birchasa v'shirasa, tushbechasa v'nechemasa, da'amiram be'alma v'imru. Amen. Baruch es Adonai HaMevorach.
Baruch Adonai HaMevorach,
Baruch Adonai HaMevorach, le'olam va'ed.
Seated, Baruch atah Adonai
Olam yotzer or uvarech hoshech, oseh shalom uvareyes hakol.
Page 150, Hakol Yutucha, Ve'Hakol Yishapucha. Motzi Chama Mimchama Levana Mechom Shifta, Uftuach HaNeshivtim Aseh Breshit. Yaleim Baruch HaMelech HaRivach HaMadein L'Ganazen L'Sud L'Gana Mishkan Miskin Miskaf Adein. Ein Kirkach Adon Tzalatech
Ein ke'erkach Adonai Eloheinu ba'olam hazeh, ve'ein zulas chamalkeinu l'chayei ha'olam haba. Efes biltecha go aleinu limos hamashiach, ve'ein domeh lecha moshienu, lischiyas hamesim.
Eladon, page 151.
El Adon al kol hamasim, Baruch u'mvarach b'fi kol neshama, God love tova malei olam. Das ist v'na sabevim osa el Adon al kol hamasim. Baruch u'mvarach b'fi kol neshama, hamizka'eh al chayas hakodesh v'nedar b'chavod al hamerkava zechus u'mishar lifnei chiso chesed v'rachamim lifnei chavodo el Adon al kol hamaasim. Baruch u'mvarach b'fi kol neshama, tovim me'ora shebara Eloheinu yitzaram b'da'as b'bina u'v'haskel koach u'gvura nasan bahem li'ahos moshlim b'kerev tevel el Adon al kol hamaasim. Baruch u'mvarach b'fi kol neshama, meleim ziv u'mefikim noga noezivam b'cholam. Smechim b'tzeisam v'sasim b'vam, osim b'ema ritzon konam el Adon al kol hamasim. Baruch u'mvarach b'fi kol neshama, pe'er v'chavod nosnim lishma tohala v'rina lezecher malchusa kara la shemesh vayizrachor ra v'hiskin turas halvana el Adon al kol hamaasim. Baruch u'mvarach b'fi kol neshama, shevach nosnim lo kol tzeva maram tiferes u'gedulah serafim v'yochanim v'chayos hakodesh el Adon al kol hamaasim. Baruch u'mvarach b'fi kol neshama.
Page 152, Leila Shar Shem Latzin. Bayom HaShvi'i ta'ala v'yoshiv b'kisei kvodo. Bayom HaShvi'i meshabech v'yomer mitzvah shel Yom HaShabbat. Aman chenem v'chanekim v'yisrael v'kedushato b'yom Shabbat Kodesh. V'yitbarach Moshe Hashem v'aseidecha
Tisbarak Mosheinu al shevach ma'aseh yadecha v'am orei or she'asisa yifaruch hasela.
153.
Tisbarak Tzurinu.
Yibarak Tzurinu Malkeinu v'koranim b'dei kadashim yishtabah shimcha la'ad Malkeinu yoseh mishatim. Kulam ahuvim, kulam berim, kulam giborim, v'chulam osim devar v'tzon konam, v'chulam potrim bepihem v'kshav Torah.
Kulam ahuvim, kulam brurim, kulam giborim, v'kulam osim be'ema u'vyira ritzon konam, v'kulam poskim espihem, b'kedusha v'tahara v'shira v'zimra, Umevarachim, Umeshabachim, Umefarim, Umaritzim, Umakdishim, Umamlichim. Hashem
ha'el ha'melech ha'gadol ha'gibor v'nora kadeshu v'kol ha'mekablim avihem ol malchut shamayim zemizeh
וכולם מקבלים עליהם או מלכות שמיים זה מזה, ונושנים רשות זה לזה, להקדיש יוצרם בנחת רוח, בשפה ברורה ובנעימה קדושה, כולם כאחרונים ואומרים ביראה. קדוש, 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 אדוני צבאות, מלך הארץ כבודו. והפנים וחיות הקודש ברעש גדול מתנשאים לעומת שרפים, לעומת סמים משבחים ואומרים ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו.
אל ברוך לימותיתם. וגבורות עשית חדשה במך ומזרת חמאס מישוע. הורתי לו דדל נפלא מחדש בטובו ביום תמים הספרש. אור חדש על ציון תאיר ונזכה
אור חדש על ציון תאיר ונזכה כולנו מהרה לאורו. ברוך אתה אדוני יוצר המאורות, אהבה רבה אהבתנו.
Page 154. לשמוע, ללמוד, ללמד, לשמור ולעשות וקיים את כל גדול. ודבק ליבנו בבית שפתך, ויחד לבבינו יעבר וירשמך וקדוש. נגילה ונשמחה בשורתך, ואבינו שלום נרבה כתבות הארץ. תודה כנרסנו בשורתתה. ובנה ואחרת מכל ובשם וקרבת אנשים וסלע באמת.
וקרבתנו לשמך הגדול סלע באמת, להודות לך ויחדך באהבה. ברוך אתה אדוני, הבוחר בעמו ישראל באהבה.
אמן. שמע ישראל, אדוני אלוהינו, אדוני אחד. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשפך ובקומך, וקשרתם להיות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. Continue with the Shema, page 156. ובכל נפשכם ונתתי מצרתכם ביטול. הישמרו לכם פן יפתה לבבכם, ושאתם ועבדתם אלוהים אחרים ושתחוויתם להם. שמתם לדברי אלה ולימדתם אותם את בניהם לדבר בם בשבתך בביתך ולדרך ובשפך ובקומך, וכתבתם מזוכתך בשלך למען ירבו ימיכם וימי בניכם האדמה ששמרה אבותיכם, לתת להם כימי השמיים על הארץ.
ויאמר אדוני אל משה לאמור, דבר אל בני ישראל ואמרת להם, יעשו להם ציצית על כנפיהם לדורותם, ונשאו על ציצית הכנף תציל תכלת, והיה לכם לציצית, וריתם אותו, וזכרתם את כל מצוות אדוני, ועשיתם אותם,
ולא תצורו אחרי לבבכם ואחריניכם אשר אתם זונים אחריהם למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים אני אדוני אלוהיכם
Adonai Elohim Amen.
ינעים ודורא ותראה מתוקן ומקובל וטוב ויפה לחזור ללמד אמת אל מגן אצל משנו לדור ודור ומשמו קיים וחיסון
לדור ודור הוא קיים ושמו קיים וחיסון נכון ומחוסו ואמונתו לעד קיימת.
רב חיים וקיימים. Page 157. Hallelujah. Emet shatu Adonai levatenu, malkeinu meglavatenu metenu gelhegelu soshuatenu,
Hodenu matzilenu me'alam shemecha, ein Elohim zulasecha.
Ezrat avoseinu bimotenu atome olam. Ashrei ish yishmal mitzvotecha, v'torah v'chasim libo. Emet atzurishon vitru acharo midatecha in l'olam l'Mashiach. Mimitzrayim ga'atan v'dan Elohenu libit avtem bitanu. Yichasum ha'yitzurayim et ha'lemechem Brachot Gadol Melech HaKayam. Rav Nisa Gadol Nora Mashbegeim B'Yeshvalim. Yonei Le'Evon B'Yeshavam.
Tehillos le'elayim baruch hu mevarach. Moshe Miriam u'bnei Yisrael lecha anu shira. B'simcha rabba v'yamru chulam. Mi chamocha bo'elim Adonai. Mi chamocha nedar b'kodesh. Nahara sehilos ha'osei feleh. Shira chadasha shibchu ge'ulim l'shimcha al sefas hayam. Yachad kulam hodu v'him lichu v'yamru. Adonai yimloch le'olam v'ed. Tzur Yisrael kuma b'ezras Yisrael.
Ufedenu mecha
Yehuda Yisrael, go aleinu, Adonai tzvahot shemo, kedosh Yisrael, Baruch atah Adonai, Ga'al Yisrael.
Together on page 159, we begin the Shabbat Shachrit Amidah, and then after the following the Kedusha, the remainder silently through page 166. Avot, Imahot.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avoseinu Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el HaGadol, HaGibor v'Hanara, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim v'Konei HaKol, V'Zofer Asei Avos, Umevi Goel Livnei V'neihem, Lema'an Shemo v'Ahava, Melech Ozer Ufoked U'Moshiach U'Magen, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham Ufoked Sarah, Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai, Moshiach, Mashiach Haruach, Umorid Hashem, Mechakel Chaim Bechesed, Mechayei Mesim Berachamim Rabim, Somech Noflim Berofei Cholim, Umatir Asurim, Umekayei Memunasav, Lishenei Afar, Michamocha Ba'al Givuras, Umidon Melach, Melech Memis, Umechayeh, Umatzmiach Yeshua, Minemonat Alachayos Mesim, Baruch Atah Adonai, Mechayeh HaMesim.
נקדש את שמך בעולם כשם שמעתי שמותו בשמי מרום ככתוב היה נביאך ורזה
נקדש את שמך בעולם כשם שמקדישים עושו בשמי מרום ככתוב על יד נביאך וקרא זה אל זה ואמר
קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות מלוך לארץ כבודו אז בקורש גדול אדיר ותמש מן כל מתנסים למצורפים למתמרוך ימרו
Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzvaos, Melech al haaretz kevodo. Az b'kol ra'ash gadol, adir v'chazak mashmi'im kol, misnasim le'umas serafim, le'umasam, Baruch Yomeru.
Baruch kavod Adonai mimkomo מתי תימלא בציון בקודם ימין ומתשכון תתקדש ותתקדש בתוך ירושלים עירך לדור
Baruch kavod Adonai mimkomo mimkomcha malkeinu Sophia v'simloch aleinu ki mechakim anachnu lach masai timloch b'tzion v'karov b'yameinu li'olam va'ed tishkon Tiskadal v'siskadash v'soch Yerushalayim ircha ledor vador u'lenetzach netzachim v'eineinu sirena malchutecha kadavar ha'amur b'shirei uzecha Sirena malchusecha kadavar ha'amur b'shirei uzecha al yedei David al yedei David al yedei David Mashiach tzidkecha al yedei David al yedei David al yedei David Mashiach tzidkecha Yimloch Adonai le'olam Elohayich Tzion Ledor vador, hallelujah. Ledor vador, nagid God lecha, ulenetzach netzachim kedushascha nakdish, v'shivchacha Eloheinu mipinu le'yamush le'olam va'ed, ki el melech gadol v'kadosh ata, baruch ata Adonai, ha'el hakadosh.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Kadesh Shabbat. Hatov kilo chalurach lechem lechem kilo tamu chasedech minam tebinu sim shalom tova Baruch atah mevarech et amo Yisrael b'Shalom. Kaddish Shalem, page 167.
Yiskadal Yiskadash Shemei Rabba.
Amen.
Yama Dibrach Yosef Yamich Malkusei B'chayechon of Yamechon of Chayedcho Beis Yisrael Bagalav Isman Karib V'imru Amen.
Amen. Yesh mei Rabba Mivara Ya'alam lo me'omaya Yipara
Yisbarach Yishtabach Yisbar Yisramah Yisnasev Yishadar Yisalev Yishalal Shemei Dekudsha
Brichu
Leila min kober chasav shirasa tush chasav nechamasa da miram b'yama v'imru Amen. Tizkabel slos hanu el sahunda ko Yisrael kadoma v'hondi b'shmaya v'imru Amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shmaya v'chayim aleinu v'al ko Yisrael v'imru Amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav v'yaseh shalom Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Hope you're well in this cold Florida environment. You threw me for a loop here. What was it, just 10 days ago? We were basking in sweat. And now actually, it's very nice. And it's good to be together. Shabbat Shalom. We have a lot to do here, discuss with our Torah portion. So let's continue with the Torah service on page 168.
Ein kamocha vo Elohim Adonai ve'ein k'maasecha malchus kol olamim u'memshaltecha b'chol dar v'dar Adonai melech Adonai malach Adonai imloch le'olam va'ed Adonai oz le'amo yitein Adonai yivarech samo v'shalom Harachamim heitiv avirtz Tivnecha Mahas Yerushalayim Kivecha Levad Batachnu Melech Elam Ben Isa Adon Olamim.
Please rise, the ark is open.
Aaron Ayomer Moshe Kuma Adonai Ve'afutzu Oivecha Ve'yanusu Misanecha Mipanecha Ki Mitzion Tetzei Sarah Mitzion Tetzei Sarah Udevar Adonai Mirushalayim Baruch Shenasan Tara Tara Baruch Shenasan Tara Tara Le'ama Yisrael Bigdushasa Berich Shemei Demarei Alma.
We are here again to affirm that the words of the Torah have outlived monuments and empires, and we want them to live through us until the end of time. We owe it to our ancestors to keep Torah alive. They struggled and suffered to preserve our way of life. They knew this to be their most precious gift to us. We owe it to our children and grandchildren to keep Torah alive. For why should they be spiritual paupers when the riches of this heritage can be theirs? We owe it to the world to keep Torah alive. This is a message which the world needs to hear, and we owe it to God to continue as a people to share his dream, to bear witness to his sovereignty, and to live the words of Torah.
Be'anarachet Velishme Kadisha Kadisha Yakira Anai Martush Bechan Be'anarachet Be'anarachet Velishme Kadisha Kadisha Yakira Anai Martush Bechan Yehi Ra'ava Kodamach Desiftach Libi Be'oraisa V'sahashlim Mishalin Delibi Beliba Dechol Amach Yisrael Letavo Lechayin Velishlam Amen. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad.
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad.
Echad Eloheinu Gadol Adonenu Kadosh Shema.
Echad Eloheinu Gadol Adonenu Kadosh Shemo.
Gadlul Adonai iti uneromema Shema yachdav Lecha Adonai Hagedula V'hagvura, v'hatiferet, v'hanetzach, v'hahod. Ki ho b'shamayim u'ba'aretz, ki ho b'shamayim u'ba'aretz. L'chadonai amam
Shabbat shalom. Hi, Sarah. Shabbat shalom.
Remember,
Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom.
V'hishtachava,
Dear
lahadom
you cannot believe how many
rav
people
kadosha. Remember, Adonai Eloheinu, v'hishtachava,
Shabbat shalom, everybody. Shabbat shalom.
Adonai Eloheinu.
My dear friend, Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom. Not well. She's in bed. Yeah, she's not feeling well. I don't know the change. Here is Ben. Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom, everyone. Shabbat shalom. Larry, Shabbat shalom. Okay. This is, well, most of the portions aren't easy. This has particular difficulty. The portion of Toldot, let me give you that page number in Breshit, chapter 27, verse 28 on page 157. And what I'm going to share with you is such an array of commentary on this portion. It is so complex. Is Jacob a good guy, a bad guy? Rivka, what's her role in all this? Stealing the birthright from her other son, the oldest son, Esau. Is Esau a figure to condemn? Poor Esau, innocent guy, gets deceived by his brother, but he turns out to be a really bad guy later. The complexity of human behavior is what this portion's all about. What we love about the Torah is its complete honesty. It's hard to tell who the good guys and the bad guys are here. It really is hard to tell. And that's the, you're going to explore with me my own thoughts about this when we have our time to share. But I want you to think about that. How do we assess this Jacob's terrible doing here, deceiving his brother? And ultimately, he becomes the bearer of the covenant. We inherit that burden. And Jacob spent the rest of his life trying to shovel himself from the horrible mess he created in many ways. He committed his deception. Later on, we're going to read deception of Lavan. He was deceived by Lavan with the marriages, and his sons told him that Joseph was killed. He really wasn't killed. So it's one big mess after the other. And that's what we're going to be talking about, the mess of human life. So with that thought, let's begin the Torah reading.
V'yazor v'yagain v'yoshua l'hochosindo v'nomar amen.
Amen.
Hakol chava gadol lahenu nu kavod l'Torah kohen krav yamdu. Eliyahu ben Yehezkel hakohen v'et dina le'abat le'b. Liliah Harishona, Baruch Shanatan Torah Le'amo Yisrael B'Kedushato, V'atem Ha'bekim Bananale Heichem, Hayim Kulchem Hayom.
Baruch es Adonai HaBarach,
Baruch Adonai Barach Elam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Barach Le'elam Va'ed, Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Olam, Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Ha'amim, V'nasan Lanu Es Toraso, Baruch Atah Adonai Nosein HaTorah.
Amen.
The first Aliyah, Genesis chapter 27, verses 28 through 30, can be found on page 157.
Amen. V'yiten lacha Elohim mital hashamayim mishmanei haaretz v'rov dagan v'tirosh yavducha amim v'yishtachavu lacha alomim hevei gvir lachecha v'yishtachavu lacha b'nei mecha orerecha aror u'mevarchecha baruch v'yehi kasher kila Yitzchak levarech et Yaakov v'yiach yatso yetze Yaakov me'et pnei Yitzchak aviv v'yesav achiv ba'mitzedo.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher nasan lanu toras emes v'chayei olam nata b'sachenu Baruch atah Adonai nosein haTorah.
Amen.
Yamod David ben Nachum Levi Liliyah Harishona.
The second Aliyah, Genesis chapter 27, verses 31 through 33, pages 157 through 158.
Baruch Adonai HaMelech,
Baruch Adonai Baruch Lelam Vahed.
Baruch Adonai HaMelech Le'olam Va'ed, Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'nasan lanu es Torto, Baruch Atah Adonai nosein haTorah.
Amen. Vayaskam hu matamim, vayavel aviv, vayomer laviv, yakum aviv v'yachal mitzei beno, va'avur tuvarchani nafshecha, vayomer lo, Yitzchak aviv mi'ata, vayomer ani, bincha v'charecha Esav, vayecherad Yitzchak charada gedola me'od, vayomer mi'efo hu hatzad tzayid, vayaveli v'chol mikol, b'terem tavo v'avarchehu gam baruch yiyeh.
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emes chayo olam natan b'sofenu Baruch Atah Adonai nosein haTorah.
Amen. And welcome back, David. Good to have you here.
Thank you.
Old friends now.
The third Aliyah, Genesis chapter 27, verses 34 through 37, page 158.
Yamod Yeshayahu Shmariyahu ben Aharon V'Rachel Liliyah Shlishi.
Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMbarach.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Lelam Vahed.
Baruch Adonai HaMbarach L'olam Va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher b'chabanu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai notein haTorah.
Amen. Kishma Esav et divrei aviv, vayitzat tza'aka, gedola u'mara ad me'od, vayomer laviv, barcheni gam ani avi, vayomer ba'achicha b'mirma, vayikach birchatecha, vayomer hachi karashemo Yaakov, vayakeveni sefa amayim et birchati lakach, v'hine ata lakach birchati, vayomer alo atzaltali bracha, vayan Yitzchak, vayomer lesav, hein gevir, samtiv lach v'yekol echav, natati lach שמחתי ולך איפה מה אעשה בני.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת וחיי עולם נטע בתוכנו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
Amen. And Yasher Koach and Mazal Tov. So you stand on the occasion of your bar mitzvah anniversary a couple years ago in South Africa.
Thank you.
Yasher Koach and Shabbat Sholom. My honor.
The fourth Aliyah, Genesis chapter 27, verses 38 through 40, pages 158 through 159.
Ya'amod Mordechai ben Yisachar of Agolda Liliah Haravi'it.
Baruchu et Adonai Hamvorach.
Baruch Adonai Barach Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Barach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torat emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. And Al Yasher Koach on your honoring your father. Blessed memory. Dear friend, we'll talk next week. We can get
Ta'amod
yeah.
Devorah bat Pinchas ve'Yehudit Liliah Hamishit.
The fifth Aliyah, Genesis chapter 27, verses 41 through 46, page 159.
Baruch et Adonai Hamvorach.
Baruch Adonai Barach Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. V'yishtam Esav et Yaakov al habracha asher beracho aviv v'yomer Esav b'libo yikravu yemei Evel aviv v'harga et Yaakov achiv Yugad l'Rivka et divrei Esav bana hagadol v'tishlach v'tikra li'Yaakov bana hakatan v'tomer elav hine Esav achicha mitnechem lacha lahargecha v'yata bani shama b'koli v'kum berach lacha et Lavan achicha rana v'yashavta imo yamim achadim ad asher tashuv chamad achicha ad shuvach achicha mimcha v'shachach et asher asita lo v'shalachti v'lakachticha misham lama eshkol gam shnechem yom echad El Yaakov katzti b'chayam mipnei banot ched im lokeach Yaakov isha banot ched ke'ela mibnot haaretz lama li chayim.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torat emet v'chayei olam nata b'sochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
The sixth Aliyah, Genesis chapter 28, verses 1 through 4, page 160.
Ta'amod Yafarut bat Lev V'Sara Liliyah HaShishit.
Baruch Hu Adonai Hamvarach.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvarach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Hamim V'natan Lanu et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen.
Amen. ויקרא יצחק אל יעקב ויברך אותו ויצווהו ויאמר לו לא תיקח אישה מבנות כנען קום לך פדן ארם ביתה בתואל אבימך וקח לך משם אישה מבנות לבן אחימך ואל שדי יברך אותך ויפרך וירבך והיית לי כלמים וייתן לך את ברכת אברהם לך ולזרעך איתך לרשתך את ארץ מגוריך אשר נתן אלוהים לאברהם.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen. Yasher Koach, John.
The seventh Aliyah, Genesis, chapter 28, verses 5 through 9, pages 160 through 161.
Ta'amod. Esther bat Avraham. V'tzapura Liliyah HaShvi'it. At Eliyahu ben Gedaliah HaLevi.
Baruch Hu Adonai Hamavarach.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Hamim V'natan Lanu et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen. וישלח יצחק את יעקב וילך פדן ארם אל לבן בן בתואל הארמי אחי רבקה אם יעקב ועשיו וירא עשיו כי ברך את יצחק כי ברך יצחק את יעקב בשילח אותו פדן ארם לקחת לו משם אישה בברך אותו ויצב עליו לאמור לא תיקח אישה מבנות כנען וישמע יעקב אל אביו ואל אמו וילך פדן ארם וירא עשיו כי רעות בנות כנען בעיני יצחק אביו וילך עשיו אל ישמעאל ויקח את מחלת בת ישמעאל בן אברהם אחות נביות על נשב לא לאישה
atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torat emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu Baruch atah Adonai notein haTorah.
Amen. Please rise for our Mishabera, for those who are ill. If there are not loved ones who are not on our formal list, please call the office. Let us include anyone that you know who is recovering from illness, and if not, also mention them in your hearts. Mishaberach Avotenu Avraham Yitzchak Yaakov, Imotenu Sarif Korachav Aleya, Yivarech Virapet Kol HaCholim. Tzvi Yitzhak ben Shima v'Chayam, David Yosef ben Chanabasha, Bata Mikila bat Nechamaleya, Hannah Chanover, Yisrael bat Shulamit, Rivka Shifra bat Sarah Rezel, Susan Burmaster, Juliana Parecki, Talia bat Moshe Yulia Rachel, Pirel Figa bat Ephraim Avraham, Chaya bat Golda, Chava bat Yochevet, Priscilla Reisinger, Tova bat Miriam v'Yitzchak, HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yimalei Rachim Amleihem, Lachtikan L'Rapotam, V'Yishlach Lehem Mehira, Refuah Shlema Min HaShamayim, U'Refuat HaNefesh, U'Refuat HaGuf, B'to Sha'ar Cholim, V'Chazek Yididei Oskim V'Tzorchehem, Shabbatim Nizok Rafo, Karavo Lavo, Ashtabi Zman Kari, V'Nomar Amen. May the one who blessed our ancestors Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and bring blessing and healing to all those we've remembered in our prayers this morning. May the Holy One mercifully restore them to health and vigor, granting them spiritual and physical well-being, together with all others who are ill. May God grant strength to those who tend to those who are ill. And though this is Shabbat, we don't cry out for help. Nevertheless, we still hope and pray that healing is at hand. Let us say Amen.
Ella refanala, Ella refanala, Ella refanala, Ella refanala, Ella refanala, Ella
Yid Gadal v'Yid Gadash Shemei Rabbah B'Yama Divra Kirite V'Yamlich Malchute V'Chayechon Uv'Yomechon Uv'Chaye D'Chol Beit Yisrael Ba'Gala Ba'Gala Uv'Yismahan Kaharib V'Maru Amen. Yehi Shmei Rabba Mavorach Leolam Lo Me'omaya Yitbarach Yitbarach V'Yishabach V'Yitbar V'Yitramam V'Yitnaseh V'Yithadar V'Yithadeh V'Yithalal Shmei Dekudesha Brichu Le'ela Min Kol Birchata V'Shirata Tushbechata V'Nechemata Dahamiran B'Alma V'Maru Amen. Yamod Harav Tzvi Ben Yehuda Lev Uvedavora Maftir.
The Maftir reading, Genesis chapter 28, verses 7 through 9, page 161.
Baruch Hu et Adonai Hamvorach. Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Le'olam Vahed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Asher Bacha Bana Mikol Hamim V'Natan Lanu et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai Notein HaTorah.
Amen. Vayishma Yaakov el Aviv Yarimo וילך בדן ארם, וירא עשיו כי רעות בנות כנען בעיני יצחק אביו, וילך עשיו אל ישמעאל, ויקח את מחלת בת ישמעאל בן אברהם אחות בביות אנשיו לא לאישה.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת וחיי עולם, נטע בתוכנו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה. Please rise.
יעמדו המגביה והגוללת לספר התורה.
וזאת התורה אשר שם משה
לפני בני ישראל על פי אדוני ביד משה.
וזאת התורה אשר שם משה לפני בני ישראל על פי אדוני ביד משה.
וזאת התורה אשר שם משה לפני
בני ישראל על פי אדוני ביד משה. La 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 la
The Haftarah for the portion of Todot is from the last of the prophets. Those who are in my class on Wednesday morning. We are heavily now into the period called the period of the Nevi'im, of the prophets. Malachi was the last of the prophets. And he prophesied sometime in the 5th century before the Common Era during the Persian Empire. So we're speaking of a very late text in terms of the prophetic literature that he has. And already by that time, there was the notion that Esav represented the most vile of all of Israel's enemies. And eventually Edom, which was a major enemy of the people of Israel at that time, and for all the biblical period, Edom was associated with the upcoming rise of the empire in Rome, the ultimate evil. So we see this remnant here, as mentioned in the beginning of the text of the first chapter of the prophet Malachi, which means my angel or my messenger. Malachi. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar b'nvi'im tovim v'ratzav divreihem hanemarim be'emet. Baruch atah Adonai habocher b'torah u'v'moshe avdo Yisrael amo u'v'nvi'ei ha'emet v'tzedek. Masad var Adonai El Yisrael biyad Malachi ahavti etchem amar Adonai v'martem b'me'avtanu halo ach Esav Yaakov ne'um Adonai v'yohav et Yaakov v'Esav saneti v'yasim et harav shemamam v'yed nachlato l'tanon midbar ki tomar Edom rushashnu v'nashuv v'nivne choravot ko aman Adonai tzevot hema yivnu v'ani eros v'karu lahem gevur isha v'ha'am asher nam Adonai ad olam b'nechem tirena ואתם תאמרו יגדל אדוני מעל לגבול ישראל. בין יכבד אביו ויעבד אדוניו, ועמיו אני אהיה כבודי, ועם אדונים אני אהיה מוראי, אמר אדוני צבאות. לכם הכהנים בוזי שמי, ואמרתם במה מבזינו את שמך. מגישים על מזבחי לחם מגועל, ואמרתם במה גאלנוך. באמורכם שולחן אדוני נבזעו. וכי תגישון עיוור לזבוח אין רם, וכי תגישו פיסר וחולה אין רע, הקריבהו נא לפחתך. היצרך אוי הישא פניך, אמר אדוני צבאות. ואתם חלו נפנה אל ויחננו, מידכם היית זאת, הישא מכם פנים, אמר אדוני צבאות. מי גם בכם ויזכור דלתיים, לא תאירו מזבחי חינם, אין לי חפץ בכם, אמר אדוני צבאות, ומנחה לא ארצה מידכם. כי ממזרח שמש ויד מבוא, גדול שמי בגויים, ומכל מקום מוכתר מוגש לשמי ומנחה תורה. כי גדול שמי בגויים, אמר אדוני צבאות, ואתם מחללים אותו באמרכם. שולחן אדוני מגועל הוא, וניבו נבזה אוכלו. ואמרתם הנה מת הפכתם אותו, אמר אדוני צבאות. והבאתם גזור, ואת הפיסח ואת החולל חלם, והבאתם את המנחה הרצה אותה מידכם, אמר אדוני. ויראו נוחה ויש בדרו זכר ונותר, וזובח מושחת לאדוני, כי מלך גדול אני, אמר אדוני צבאות, ושמי נורא בגויים. ועתה עליכם המצווה הזאת הכהנים, אם לא תשמעו, אם לא תשימו עליהם לתת כבוד לשמי, אמר אדוני צבאות. ושילחתי בכם את המארה, ויראתי את ברכותיכם, וגם ארותיה, כי אינכם שמים עליהם. הנני גואר לכם את הזרע, וזרעתי הפרש על פניכם, פרש חגיכם, ונשא אתכם אליו. וידעתם כי שילחתי עליכם את המצווה הזאת, להיות בריתי את לוי, אמר אדוני צבאות. בריתי הייתה איתו, החיים והשלום, וידנם לו מורא ויראני, מפני שמי ניחתו. תורת אמת הייתה בפיהו, ויבלה לא נמצא בשפתיו. בשלום ובמישור הלך איתי, ורבים השיב מעוון. כי שפתי כהן ישמרו דעת, ותורה יבקשו מפיהו, כי מלך אדוני צבאות הוא. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, צור כל העולמים, צדיק בכל הדורות, האל הנאמן האומר ויעשה, המדבר ומקיים שכל דבריו אמת וצדק. נאמן אתה אדוני אלוהינו, ונאמנים דבריך, ודבריך מברך, אחורי ישוב ריקם, כי המלך נאמן ורחמן אתה. ברוך אתה אדוני האל הנאמן בכל דבריו. רחם על ציון כי בית חיינו, ולעד נפש תושיע במהרה בימינו. ברוך אתה אדוני משמח ציון בבניה. שמחנו אדוני אלוהינו באליהו הנביא עבדך, ומלכות בית אבי משיחך, במהרה יבוא ויגל ליבנו, הכיסו לא ישב זר, ולא ינחלו עוד אחרים את כבודו, כי בשם קודשך נשבעת לו, שלא יכפה נרו לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני מגן דוד. על התורה ועל העבודה ועל הנביאים ועל יום השבת הזה שנתת לנו אדוני אלוהינו, לקדושה ולמנוחה, לכבוד ולתפארת. על הכל אדוני אלוהינו אנחנו מודים לך ומברכים אותך. יפרש שמך בפי כל חי תמיד לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת. Please rise, everyone, as we invoke the prayer for our country and these United States. Let's read the first paragraph of the prayer on page 177. Our God and God of our ancestors, with mercy, accept our prayer on behalf of our country and its government. Pour out your blessing upon this land, upon its inhabitants, upon its leaders, its judges, officers, and officials who faithfully devote themselves to the needs of the public. Help them understand the rules of justice you have decreed, so that peace and security, happiness and freedom will never depart from our land. And let's read together in the Hebrew text, Tfilat Lishlom Medinat Yisrael, on page 178. Avinu Shebashamayim, Sur Yisrael v'Goalo, Barech et Medinat Yisrael, Reshit Smichat Geulatenu, Hagen Aleha, Befrat Chastecha, Ufras Aleha, Sukat Shlomecha, Ushlach Orcha v'Yamitzcha, Larasheha Sareha, V'Yoetzeha, V'Takneim Be'itza Tova Milfanecha, Hazek et Yidei Migel Eretz Kodshenu, V'Hanchilem Eloheinu Yeshua, V'Atere Nitzachon Ta'atreim, V'Natata Shalom Ba'aretz, V'Simchat Olam Liyoshveha, V'Nomar. Amen. Please be seated. Page 181, Ashreyosh Ve'Vetecha.
Ashrei Yoshvei Veitecha, O Jehalelu Chasela. Ashrei Ha'am Shekalo, Ashrei Ha'am She'adonai Elohav. Aramim Chalohai HaMelech V'yarvach Hashemcha Le'olam Va'ed.
V'chol Yom Avarchecha Hallel Shimcha Le'olam Va'ed.
Gadol Adonai u'mehula me'od, v'li gdulatav ein cheker. Dor ledor yeshabach masecha, ugvurotecha yagidu. Hadar kivod hodecha, v'divrei niflotecha asicha, v'yezuz norotecha yomeru, ugdulatecha asaprena. Zecher avtucha yabiu, v'tzidkatecha yiranenu. Chanum v'rachum Adonai, erech apayim ugdocha hased. Tov Adonai lakol, v'racham avakom ma'asav. Yoducha Adonai, kol ma'asecha v'chasidecha yivarchucha. Kevod malchutcha yomeru, ugevuratecha yedaberu. Leodia livnei adam gevurotav, uchvod hadar malchutav. Malchutecha malchut kol olamim, umemshaltecha bechal dor vador. Somech Adonai lechol hanoflim, v'zokech lechol hakefufim. Einei kol elecha yisaberu, v'atanoten lahem et aflam v'ito. Poteach et yadecha, u'masbia lechol chai ratzon. Tzadik Adonai bechol derachav, v'chasid bechol masav. Karov Adonai lechol korav, v'chol asher yikra'u v'yemet. Ritzon yireya v'yaseh, v'yet shavatam yishma v'yoshin.
Shomer Adonai et kol ohavav,
v'yet kol hashayim yashmi. Tilat Adonai yedaber pi, v'yireh kol basar shem kachil le'olam va'ed.
V'anachnu nivarech ya
Me'ata me'ad olam. Hallelujah.
Please rise. Page 183.
Hallelujah et Shem Adonai, ki niskav shemo levado. Hodo aleret v'shamayim, vayarem keren liyamo. Tila lechol chasidam, livnei Yisrael am karovo. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Mizmor leDavid, Havu Adonai b'nei Elim, Havu Adonai kavod va'os, Havu Adonai kivod shemo, Hishtachavu Adonai behadras kodesh. Kol Adonai al hamayim el hakavod hirim, Adonai al mayim rabim. Kol Adonai.
You're not Iris anymore. You're my cousin. Thank you.
Behadon. Kol Adonai shaveh arazim, vayshaver Adonai et arzei halevanon. Vayarkitem kemo egel levanon v'siryon, kemo v'nreimim. Kol Adonai chotzef lavotesh, Kol Adonai yachil midbar, Yachil Adonai midbar kadesh. Kol Adonai yecholel ayalot, Vayechesof ya'arot uvehechalal, Kulo omer kavod. Adonai lamabu yashavayeshev Adonai melech le'olam. Adonai oz le'amo yitein. Adonai
Okay. Give me a
Yevarech
prog-
et
good
amo
progress report.
v'shalom.
Oh, yeah, it's okay.
Uvenucha
Shabbat
yomar.
shalom, Shabbat shalom. Uvnecho yomar.
Ki lekach tov natati lachem Torati al ta'azovu Eitz chayim hi lamachazikim ba v'tamcheha meyushar deracheha darchei noam v'chol netivoteha shalom hashivenu Adonai elecha b'nashuva chadesh yameinu kekedem yanai nai 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 yanai nai yanai nai yanai nai yanai yanai nai yanai nai Yai na 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 ya na 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 Hashivenu elecha elecha v'nashuva chadesh chadesh yameinu chadesh yameinu
Kedem Yeshakach. After singing like that, it's hard to speak. Get all carried away. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Again, you're kind of going into my laboratory here. It's a very interesting portion. I always struggle with Toldot. It's such a strange, strange thing here. And it's an astounding, that's the point. This is an astounding look, in my view, of the complexity of human beings. Where evil appears to be good, what Jacob did was evil, and then there's an ultimate goodness that comes from his behavior. And then Esau, who was really just trying to please his father, gets bashed over the head, his birthright is stolen from him, and that appears as an evil ultimately. As the rabbis teach us, we're really a very strange mixture of Yetzer HaTov and Yetzer HaRa. It's hard to tell sometimes what a human being is. We have to always remember that even the most evil have a part of them that's good, perhaps a few exceptions to that rule. So Jacob steals the birthright from his brother Esau, and he keeps us on edge because when we first read this, we know that his behavior seems so wrong. He took advantage of his his older brother was coming in and hungry, was begging for food. Eventually he was given a bowl of lentils, or soup, however that's translated, for the birthright. That was quite a bad deal for Esau. And there are all kinds of harmonization attempts made by the rabbis to justify what is going on, which also even adds to the bewilderment as to what's really going on here. Most of the commentaries see what Jacob did as obviously turning into an ultimate good in what happened, that Jacob deserved to receive the birthright, that he had to do what he had to do in order to achieve that. He was an ish tam, he was wholehearted, he was the good one, he was the bookworm, he was the one who lived in tents, Ohalim, and studied Torah all day long. And Esau, of course, was the hunter and the evil one, the physical one. And so therefore, what appears to be evil in Jacob's behavior ultimately you could justify what he did because the stakes were so large. And you have Rebekah pitted against her husband by favoring Jacob, who Isaac had no idea that his wife was going to favor Jacob over the eldest. Remember, in the ancient Near East, for the firstborn, of which Esau was, not to receive the birthright was a major violation of ancient Near Eastern custom and law. So there was a huge disruption going on here. Torah is very clear that she loved Yaakov, she loved Jacob, and instinctively felt that her eldest son, Esau, had no future with her family, with the future of the covenant. There is an interesting midrash that says that what the Torah tells us about two distinct individuals, Esau and Yaakov, was really one personality. That was really just one son, and that they had both Esau and Yaakov. This was very much debated when Zionism first appeared on the scene in the late 19th century, about the changing character of the Jewish people who were called upon to struggle for their national rights, and who had to adopt, in the face of the pogroms and the violence and the increase of anti-Semitism, had to adopt a more Esau position, the physical one, in order to stay alive. It's a very interesting debate. This debate takes place during the Second Temple. It takes place in the Maccabean Revolt. It takes place when the Jews rose up in revolt twice against the Romans, that the Jews needed to exercise the Esau part of themselves, the physical part of ourselves, in order to stay alive in this difficult world. So who are we? Yaakov? Esau? Are we a mixture of all of that? Are we too quick to condemn the Esau part of us? Or the Yaakov? The Zionists thought we were too quick to be totally enwrapped in the Yaakov part of us? Very interesting. The Chalutzim, the IDF, the Haganah, all those who fought for Jewish sovereignty, as we still know, Israel today still has to exercise a great deal of physical might in order to stay alive. I'm just sharing with you, this is all very complicated. Even in Jewish history, the mixture is quite apparent. And how complex is human behavior? I think you all know that I'm an historian, and I love history, and I love the retrospective of history, because it's not always what it appeared at the time. For example, those who were perceived as evil turned out to be good. The classic example in the 20th century is Winston Churchill. When he became prime minister in it was either 40 or 39, I think it was 40, May 1940, he was perceived as the craziest right-winger, an alcoholic, a racist from his all kinds of statements about the British Empire, boorish, insulting, miserable human being. But we know from Winston Churchill, and I recommend you read Andrew Roberts' biography. That's the best biography of Winston Churchill. What an interesting character. He turned out to be, perhaps you might have a different individual, but perhaps the savior of the Western world in World War II. He was a lonely warrior. The Brits, not being able to know this, they were ready to surrender to Hitler almost immediately. And he said, we can't do that. You cannot allow the Nazis to come into our country or be anywhere close. You don't surrender to fascism. If not for Churchill, we could make a good case that the world would have collapsed. The United States wasn't in the war yet. He was a lonely figure in fighting against the Nazis when it was not that popular yet. So the evil one turned into this great, great leader. I'll give you another example where someone who appeared to be good turned out to be lousy, in fact evil. You know, I'm also, I read a lot about American history, and which book did I don't remember where I derived this from. I read a lot of books. But the figure of Andrew Johnson, I don't know if you know Andrew Johnson, he was the one who succeeded Abraham Lincoln in 1865. He was the first president to be impeached, not removed from office, but it was very close. What is interesting that I didn't know, in 1864, when Abraham Lincoln was running for re-election, all the abolitionists, all the progressives in the North wanted him to remove Hannibal Hamlin, who was the vice president, was a very fine and decent man from Maine. They wanted Lincoln to remove him and appoint Andrew Johnson because they considered him to be a fighter for the black slaves. He was a Tennessean. He battled the Confederates. He was this great humanitarian, and they put pressure on Lincoln to get rid of a very fine vice president. Andrew Johnson became the president. He was perhaps the worst president this country ever had. He was corrupt. He appeared, by the way, at the inauguration of Lincoln in 1864, completely drunk, and that really set the tone for the entire time for him. He was a loose cannon. He was horrible. Those are just a couple examples. He was supposed to be good, turned out to be horrible. Other examples, when Harry Truman left the White House in 1953, his popularity rating was down to about 15%. They couldn't wait to get rid of Harry Truman. And in retrospect, he's considered one of our great presidents. Got us through World War II, no communication from this predecessor, the one who recognized Israel. Dear Harry turned out to be okay. Another example from Jewish history, Theodor Herzl. Not many people know this. When he died in 1904 at a young age of 41, he was considered to be the greatest evil to the Zionist Congress imaginable. And even during his years of promoting Zionism, he was considered to be a madman, absolutely crazy, going to world leaders, trying to promote the idea of Zionism. And when he died, he had this view that he wanted the Jews to consider moving to Uganda, 1903. He was literally thrown out of the Zionist Congress for that. And look how his image appears in retrospect as the great pioneer of Zionism. Without him, you could very much make a case that Israel wouldn't be in existence today. Ben Gurion, Tom Segev's biography of Ben Gurion, his exalted position has been somewhat lowered by a lot of things that he did. Complicated. If you're interested, I would recommend Tom Segev's biography. FDR, who was, in our family, if you said anything about Franklin Delano Roosevelt, you were a shanda disgrace. But now we know it was a lot more complicated. He threw his wife out of the White House. Eleanor was a great woman. He didn't want to hear about the Jewish problem in Europe. He had other matters to consider, and he could have done a lot to help more Jews before the war and during the war. Oh, here's another figure that I like, Woodrow Wilson. When I was a kid, Woodrow Wilson was like the great president from World War I, the humanitarian, the educator. He was a very educated man. He was the president of Princeton University. He really put that university on the map when he was their governor of New Jersey. And he was president for 2 terms. Last 2 years, he was completely gone after a stroke. That's another interesting story. But his ratings as one of the great presidents has plummeted in the last few years because of his racist views about blacks. He was a promoter of the Ku Klux Klan. Birth of a Nation was proudly presented in the White House when it debuted. Very interesting. And so this good man's reputation has really been sinking in these last years. I'll give you a couple examples of American history. I love doing this. It's so interesting in American history of individuals who in the last 20 years have gone from the bottom to the top. The ones who really have their reputations now in the clear are the second president of the United States, John Adams, and now in recent years, Alexander Hamilton. You never even heard about Hamilton 10, 15 years ago before the Broadway show. And now he's considered to be the savior of the American nation, Alexander, and a hero of the Jewish people, by the way, which we didn't know about. So it's very interesting. So I want to share with you, I'm just sharing you with all that because it's like our Torah portion. Sometimes we can't see what's good through the bad, what's bad through the good. And we have the great Hans Christian Andersen fable, The Emperor's New Clothes, which for those of you be reminded of that great, profound tale, which is very much in sync with our Torah portion, about the emperor who took pride in his clothing and how he looked, his external appearance. He was an enormously popular emperor, and his advisors encouraged the emperor to buy the most wonderful and beautiful, colorful outfit he could find. And only the stupid ones would not see that this was just a veneer, but everybody else would praise the emperor for his beautiful new clothing, just like Henry VIII, who also this grotesque murderer who enwrapped himself in beautiful garments. So the emperor sent his advisors to view the new regal attire, and the trouble is when they went there, they couldn't see a darn thing. They were too embarrassed to tell the emperor that they could not see the garments that he had chosen. And yet they praised the new garments and clothes in order to butter up the emperor who was so popular. Only the stupid would not be able to see the superficiality of it all, and all else would still praise the emperor. So the emperor went to see the clothing, and he couldn't see them either, but he didn't want to admit to his advisors that he couldn't see anything because they had told him that they had seen the clothing, and he told them how great the new clothing was. So he played along with the game, and he went on a tour walking without clothing that he had proposed to put on, and he walked through the town, and the townspeople were too ashamed to admit that he was without clothing at all. They didn't want to appear to embarrass or contradict the emperor until finally a child looked up and said at the emperor and shouted out, "Look, the emperor has no clothing at all." And everyone, including the emperor himself, was exposed. He knew that the child was right about what the child had said, as all the people did, but he kept parading through the street as if nothing was said, an empty shell of an emperor. It's a great story. So it says a lot about how people will follow leaders or whatever who have an external veneer that really doesn't exist. And so it is with so much of life. It's very interesting. There's a commentary from an obscure text called Degel Machne Ephraim, written by the grandson of the Baal Shem Tov, who made this comparison with the portion this week. You can look it up. It says that when Esav was named, it says Vayikra'u Oto, they named him. So you assume that Rivka and Isaac named Isaac. But when it came to Jacob, it says Vayikra Oto. He was named. Only one person named him. And you see in our translation they continue with they, but the Hebrew doesn't say that. It says it or the individual, one person named Jacob. So the commentary says Esav's naming was in the plural because many people were attracted to his personality, even though he was really a facade and not wholehearted, whereas Jacob was wholehearted, so therefore his name was one, was Tom, was complete, and therefore everybody followed Yaakov. So it's very hard sometimes. I just leave you with this thought. I find it so fascinating, given the fast pace of the way our world changes, how hard it is sometimes to distinguish between truth and falsehood. In the great novel, Don Quixote by Cervantes, in 16th or 17th century, the whole theme of the book was Don Quixote a madman, or was he a brave soldier for protesting the rest of the society around him? How complicated it is to distill between truth and falsehood. I guess the final thing that we can say about all this, which is what's stewing here in the portion of Toldot, is that we always have to be reminded about being humble in our opinions. We don't know how things are going to be viewed years from now. And that we have to be humble in the way we speak, even of Esav and Yaakov. There's good and there's bad, and there's a lot of balancing act going around here. A lot of the good that's turned upside down and the evil that's turned upside down. People who were alone in history, we know, like Galileo, suffered tremendously, but they were proven to be great later on in history. Rabbi Joshua, the poor rabbi of the first century, Abraham, Herzl. We have all kinds of individuals in our own history who at the time were considered to be lunatics in many ways, turn out to be hailed as great heroes of our people. So I think what the Torah portion is trying to teach us is that the pursuit of truth is very hazy, but important for us to understand how often in Jewish history, by the way, our people have turned towards the emperor without clothing. We're going to be studying this in our classes, how Jews rushed to assimilate in the late 18th century and 19th century, to disown their attachments to traditional Judaism, to the understanding of the importance of the land of Israel as part of the collapse of Jewish identity in the 19th century. And assimilation. There were those like Josephus who joined the bad guys. They joined Rome, or Jews who joined the socialist movement in the 20th century, only to be executed in great numbers by Stalin between 36 and 39, and on and on. So when I read this, whether it be myself or you, let us try to keep our search and be humble always in how we feel and what our positions are, because they might not be so true, and we might not be so correct, and we have to listen to each other a lot more, because if we don't, we're going to fall into the trap that has taken place throughout history. So that's the lesson here. Let us see the good, what's going on in different views, and try to learn from the very complexity of human behavior. Must always remember that. Shabbat Sholom, everyone. So let's rise. That wasn't an easy text, but let's rise. Page 184, Chatzi Kaddish. We're going to recite the Chatzi Kaddish, go right into the Amidah and the Kedusha, and then we're going to continue silently through page 192. You have a kavanah.
So I like to begin with a kavanah when I lead davening. And today it's going to be it is a piece by Leonard Cohen, one of our great Jewish poets, called Friend When You Speak. Friend, when you speak this carefully, I know it is because you don't know what to say. I listen in such a way so as not to add to your confusion. I make some reply at every opportunity so as not to compound your loneliness. Thus the conversation continues under an umbrella of optimism. If you suggest a feeling, I affirm it. If you provoke, I accept the challenge. The surface is thick, but it has its flaws, and hopefully we will trip on one of them. Now we can order a meat sandwich for the protein, or we can take our places in the Sanhedrin and determine what it is to be done with those great cubes of diamond that our teacher Moses shouldered down the mountain. You want to place them in such a way that the sun by day and the moon and the stars by night will shine through them. I suggest another perspective which would include the light of the celestial bodies within the supernal radiance of the cubes. We lean toward each other over the table. The dust mingles with the mist. Our nostrils widen. We are definitely interested. Now we can get down to a Jew's business. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabba.
Amen.
V'yomad yivrach yirutei v'yamlich malchutei b'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael Bagala u'v'zman kariv v'yimaru Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabba Mevarach Le'olam Le'olmei Omaya Yitbarach Yitbarach V'yishtabach V'yitba'ar V'yitramam V'yitnaseh V'yithadar V'yitaleh V'yitalal Shemei Dekudesha Barichu Li'ela Min Kol Birchata V'shirata Tush Bechata V'nechemata Damiran V'yalema V'yimaru Amen. Adonai Sifatai Tiftach Ufiyagi Tehilatecha. Please open our lips so that our mouths can say your praises. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avoteinu Elohei Abraham Elohei Yitzchak v'Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Rachel v'Elohei Leah Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor v'Hanora El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, V'konei HaKol, V'zocher Chastei Avot, Umevi Goel Livnei V'neihem, Leman Shemo V'yahava, Melech Ozer Ufoked U'Moshiach U'Magen, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham, Ufokei Sarah, Ata Gibor Le'olam Adonai, Mechayei Metim Atarav L'Hoshia, Mashiv HaRuach U'Morid HaGashem, Mechalkel Chayim B'Chesed, Mechayei Metim B'Rachamim Rabim, Somech Noflim, V'rofei cholim, u'matir hasurim, u'mekayem emunato, lishenei afar, michamocha ba'al gevurot, u'midol melach, melech memit u'mechayem, U'matzmiach Yeshua, V'nemanata l'hachayot meitim, Baruch atah Adonai, Mechayei ha'meitim.
Amen. Nari Savanach Yishchach, Gezos Yosef Kodesh, Makdishim Shimcha BaKodesh, Kakat
Naharitzecha, V'nahakdishecha, Kesotziach, Sarfei Kodesh, Hamakdishim, Shimcha BaKodesh, Kakahatuv, Al Yad Nevi'echa, V'kara
זה אל זה ויאמר קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות מלוך על הארץ כבודו כבודו מלא עולם מושעתיו שונים זה לזה היה מקום כבודו למתם ברוך יאמרו
קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות מלוא כל הארץ כבודו כבודו מלא עולם משרתיו שואלים זה לזה איה מקום כבודו ליומתם ברוך יאמרו ברוך כבוד אדוני
ממקומו יפם ברחמים ויחונם יחד עם שמו ערב ובוקר בכל יום תמיד פעמיים ביבה שמה אומרים
ממקומו הוא יפן ברחמים ויחונם המייחדים שמו ערב ובוקר בכל יום תמיד פעמיים ביבה שמה אומרים שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו אדוני אחד
הוא אלוהינו אבינו ומלכנו מושיענו והוא ישמיר ברחמה שני בני כוחן להיות לכם לאלוהים
הוא אלוהינו הוא אבינו הוא מלכנו הוא מושיענו והוא ישמיענו ברחמיו שנית לעיני כל חי להיות לכם לאלוהים
אני אדוני
אלוהיכם ובדברי קודשך כתוב לאמור
ימלוך לעד עולם אלוהי ציון לדור ודור הללויה
לדור ודור נגיד גודלך we will speak of your greatness from one generation to the next ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש ושבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש לעולם ועד כי אל מלך גדול וקדוש אתה ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש
תיקנת שבת רצית קורבנותיה some fun it out. Yismechu v'malechutecha shomri Shabbat. Shalom Tova Toratcha hayim yavachesed
Yavo Shalom Aleinu Ve'al Kulam. Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu. Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu. Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu Ve'al Kulam. Shalom Aleinu Ve'al Kol Ha'olam. Shalom, salam, salam, aleinu ve'al kol ha'olam, salam, shalom. Page 203.
Page 203. Kaddish Shalem.
Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabba.
Amen.
V'alma dibrachi v'tei v'yamlich malchutei v'chayechonu v'yomechonu v'chayetecho beit Yisrael ba'gala b'zman kariv yimeru. Amen. Yehi shmei Rabba mevorach v'yalom v'yomaya yiparach. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yiprar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitala v'yitala shemei dekudisha.
Barichu.
Li'ela mikol berchasa v'shirasa tishbachasa v'nechamasa damiram b'yalma v'yimeru.
Amen.
Tiskabot tzlasan v'hosan d'chol Yisrael karam avundi b'shmai v'yimeru.
Amen.
Yehi shlom rabba min shemai v'chayim aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'yimeru.
Amen.
Oseh shalom b'mromav. Buyaseh shalom aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'yal kol yoshvei tevel v'yimeru.
Amen. In Kelohenu, page 204.
Enke Eloheinu, Enke Adonenu, Enke Malkeinu, Enke Moshienu, Micha Eloheinu, Micha Adonenu, Micha Malkeinu, Micha Moshienu, Nodel Eloheinu, Nodel Adonenu, Nodel Malkeinu, Nodel Moshienu, Baruch Eloheinu, Baruch Adonenu, Baruch Malkeinu, Baruch Moshienu, Atahu Eloheinu, Atahu Adonenu, Atahu Malkeinu, Atahu Moshienu, Atahu Shetiru, Avotenu, Lefanecha, Eketoret Hasamin.
Aleinu, please rise, page 205.
Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, l'teit gedula l'yotzer bereshit, shelo asanu k'goyei haratzot, v'lo samanu k'mishpachot ha'adama, shelo sam chelkeinu kahem, v'gor aleinu k'chol hamonam, Ve'anachnu korim u'mishtachavim u'modim lifnei melech malchei hamlachim hakadosh baruch hu.
Shehunat Shammai v'yosaret, Moshe v'ikaro b'Shammai mimal, Shechinat Zol b'gofei v'ramimenu. Nino l'akei nikaved echad Eloheinu, l'irot mino b'tivrezecha. L'takid olam b'malchut shelai v'chol wedim v'sarnik v'shmecha l'flan v'kosh aras akiru v'kosh v'teva. Tishava kol hashon l'fanech Eloheinu k'bri polo.
Takatu b'toratecha Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed v'ne'emar v'haya Adonai le'melech al kol ha'aretz bayom hahu bayom hahu yeh Adonai echad u'shemo Shemo echad.
Please be seated. As we pause to remember the yahrzeits observed this week, the first and second week of the month of Kislev, we remember Dolly Ash, Ellie Dorfman, Joseph Brilliant, Benjamin Miller, Alan Edelman, Nelson Fishman, Hilda Florsheim, Oscar Gartenberg, Aline Freyd, Sheila Gitlitz, Bela Kagan, Jerry Schwalb, Louis Gustav, Miriam Wexler, Louis Gustow, Henrietta Katz, Paul Weinstein, Abraham Fine, Benjamin Rappaport, Ida Millman, Martin Paver, Renee Miller, Jean Fine, Golda Finkel, Charles Steinhardt, Samuel Silverman, Abraham Greenberg, Rudolph Troback, Eric Tridell, Sarah Wolf, Sarah Zatz, all of blessed memory. So those remembering yahrzeits and those still in mourning at home and here, please rise for the Kaddish Tome, the mourner's Kaddish in their memory. Page 207. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei Rabbah, v'yalma divrach yirutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon of yomechon, v'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael, ba'agalam v'zman karim v'imru, Amen. Yehi shmei Rabbah mevarach v'lam l'mei maya, yiparach v'yishtabach, v'yitbar v'yitromam v'yitnasei, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal, Shmei de Kudusha Brichu, Leila min kol bechata v'shirata, tush bechata v'nechmata, damiran bi'alma v'imru, Amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shmaya, v'chayim aleinu, v'al kol Yisrael v'imru, Amen. Ose shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu, v'al kol Yisrael v'imru, Please be seated with our announcements this Shabbat. Marsha.
I want to welcome all of you here and all of those people who are live streaming it. I want to say it was a very provocative sermon you gave.
Very interesting.
But I do think that it is always important to remember that the complexity of everybody,
Yes.
and we shouldn't rush to judgment.
Yes.
As the rabbi pointed out, I have a different story than Christensen. My favorite is never judge a book by the cover. You never know what might be inside.
That's the lesson.
Our Bima baskets are from Lauren and Todd Haven in honor of their daughter's wedding. We hope the weather gets better for them, and we congratulate them. We have a number of mazel tovs. Dr. Norman April, Dr. Bruce Fliegler, Dr. Kenneth Hurwitz, Dr. Richard Lichtenstein. They've all been recognized by the Sarasota Memorial Hospital and given various titles and positions in recognition of their work. I also want to recognize Benjamin Hannon, who has been named Regional Leader of the Corporate Tax and Transaction Service Line. I'm not sure what a service line is, but at Shoemaker Law. We have a lot happening. Now that our major holidays are over, I don't want you to think that the synagogue isn't a place to be and is very active. Tomorrow we are going to have a Zoom on the life in Shanghai ghetto during World War II, begin at 10 o'clock, and in no particular chronological order. We have our congregation meeting and election on Sunday, December 12th. It will be in person and on Zoom, but it's always a great way to see some people and to recognize the old leaders of the congregation and the new ones coming in. We have the rabbis' 2 classes on Tuesday and Wednesday. And for all the ladies and men who would like to join, we are resuming our mahjong on Tuesdays at 12:30. And everybody who's been playing online now has to figure out what to do with the tiles because the computer no longer does it for you. In January, we have the Ozzy concert. For those of you who went, I guess it was now 2 years ago, you know how exciting it is and how enjoyable. And those who didn't, you are in for a real treat. I understand from Serenade that we still have some tickets left, but they are going very quickly, and soon the Opera House will be sold out. We have the Pisman weekend in February, and I'm sure I forgot something important I was supposed to say, but I don't know what it is. I do want to remind everybody that it is important that we all get our booster shots. I know that pretty much everybody here has had their 2 shots, but they are now showing with all these different variations the importance of getting your booster. CVS, Sarasota Memorial, Walgreens, it's pretty easy to do. Most of the places you don't even have to make an appointment, and they are free. So I urge everybody to take the opportunity, because the consequences are much more major than the minimal inconvenience of getting it. I did forget our new member welcome on November 20th, and all of you who attend the service on a regular basis, it would be great if you show up. I'm sure Eric will give a speech to the board of directors telling them how it is, but these new members need to feel that they are part of a community. They're just not new and going to sit in the back of the room, but that the congregation does welcome them. And if I forgot anything, I apologize, but there are a lot of exciting things happening. Shabbat Sholom.
I just want to add, thanks, Marcia. And yes, it was an interesting presentation. Wednesday at 1:30, my friend, who I befriended while I was in London, he was the deputy ambassador from Austria to the United Kingdom, Christoph Weidinger. He's going to be our guest on Wednesday. He's a very distinguished leader in the Austrian government. He has worked tirelessly to help his leaders, the people he works with, certainly, to be aware of Austria's not-so-pleasant past. And he was really a champion of that when he was in the UK and continues to do so. He's going to tell us about what he's doing in Kosovo, where he's the ambassador from Austria there. So I hope you join. He's a delightful individual, and I know that you will come away having been uplifted by what he is doing. I want to share just one other extremely important thing. This is from Michael Krasno. Did you know, Michael, that in the World Series this had never occurred before, where the pitcher, Max Fried, was Jewish, who pitched to the batter Alex Bregman of the Astros, who was Jewish, who flew out to the right fielder Jock Peterson, who was Jewish. That had never occurred before. Dear Michael, how about that? Now that's important. Yasher Koach to our Jewish athletes. Anybody here who is new visiting us? I didn't see it. Can you introduce yourself? Sort of new. I know you're not. What a pleasure to have you. We welcome you with our open arms. You're in the greatest congregation in the United States, if not the world. Anybody else who's new here? Yes, in the back. You just joined. We love having you. Thank you. What a pleasure. Shabbat Shalom. Anyone else? I want to miss anybody. All right, then, Sharon, what a pleasure.
Okay,
It's been
before
a
Adon Olam, I want to say the same thing I say all the time. We take off our talis when we're done davening. So when people take it off in the middle of Adon Olam, what you're saying is Adon Olam doesn't matter.
Oh.
But if you look at Adon Olam, it's the best liturgy we have. There isn't any better liturgy.
I agree.
So pay attention to it. Don't take off your talis.
Shalom, Shlomo Ibn Gabirol, maybe, we're not sure, but it's you're right. It's absolutely
one of the
brilliant
greats.
text. 12th century.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Adon Olam Asher Malach B'terem Kol Yitzir Nivra Li'ed Nasa B'chefso Kol Azai Melech Shemo Nikra Azai Melech Shemo Nikra V'acharei kichlot hakol Levado yimloch nora V'hu haya V'hu hoveh V'hu yiyeh B'tifara V'hu yiyeh B'tifara V'hu echad V'en sheni Lehamshilo Lehachbira, Bili Reshit, Bili Tachlit, Velo Ha'oz, V'hamisra, Velo Ha'oz, V'hamisra, V'hu Eli, V'chai Goali, V'tzor Chavli, V'yetzara, V'hu Nisi, Umanos li menat kosi biyom ekra menat kosi biyom ekra biyado afki bruchi v'yeti shan v'ya'ira v'imruchi giviyati Adonai li v'lo ira Adonai li velo ira. Shabbat Shalom.
Please rise, everyone. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et Shabbat, lasot et ha-Shabbat l'dorotam brit olam. Beini uvein b'nei Yisrael oti li'olam, ki shesheti mimasa Adonai, et ha-shamayim v'et haaretz v'yom hashvi, Shabbat v'yina fasha kein berachna el yom hashvat, v'yikachehu. Savri Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, borei pri hagafen. Now we'll break bread. Oops. Oh, I forgot to take it out of the... B'shutchem Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, Hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Te'avon, everyone. You're welcome to get fresh challah. Shabbat Shalom. No more green. No more green. Ella's in bed sick today.
So next week, the women.
Did I mess you up with Asaph and Yaakov?
No, I love that.
Oh, it's very
because I've been studying that portion for a while. But next week.
The mandrake. You're into the mandrake.
Not only the mandrakes, but the women
I
get
have
into
never
it.
heard a rabbi talk about the mandrakes in my entire.
Well, maybe we'll break tradition.
I'm trying to remember. Do I ever read anything of it?
But look, Leah is like, so she's not loved, so God opens up
Leah.
her womb. But then Rachel gets upset. She's given Yaakov the women, her handmaids, and then they have the mandrake exchange.
You're gonna drive me.
I'll see you around.
Do you see the brilliance of Rachel? All these people are so mixed up.
And in the next portion, it says God is in this place.
I didn't know it. Lo yadati. That's right.
He'll do it. Okay. Rabbi, I have a question for you, first of all.
I'm fine. Ella's already sick.
Oh, I know.
She's in bed. I don't know how to change them. I don't know.
Yeah. Do you know about this gender that we're using?
Something about the pieces. I don't know.
It's about $70,000. There's only about 4 of them in the country.
Really?
And it holds every
all
single
kinds of
piece
pieces.
of Judaica in that you need for an entire.
Hi, sir. I found a link. I found a link to the woman who donated this. I've forgotten her name, but I can get it. I can get contact information.
Yes, and you know, you're just using it.
Yes, but we're not taking advantage of. Yeah. Yes. Everything open. Uh-huh.
About 10 years ago, and show us how it works.
Yeah.
But we had somebody come to show us how it works.
A friend of mine back from Greenwich is dating her.
Oh, you're kidding?
So I can track her down and,
Oh,
and
good.
again put her in touch with you.
Yeah, well, we had it done years ago. There
Yes.
should be a.
There's something for every Jewish
Yes,
holiday.
I know, we had
in-
it.
in here.
We had it shown
Yes.
years ago. There's a challah knife with salt. There's everything.
Places to put everything in.
Everything.
Everything, the whole thing comes apart.
How old is the piece? I'd love to have somebody explain this.
No. Just this week, a friend of mine from Greenwich started dating the woman who donated this.
Oh,
So I can get in touch with her.
Yeah, because, but we know the artist, I just can't think of his name.
Yeah.
We met him here.
He came here and showed.
Yeah.
When
We also have met with him in Jerusalem.
Oh, okay.
He's a really, he's here in the States a lot. It would be interesting to have him.
Yes. Show again. I'm pretty sure I can get her contact information. So, okay. That's right. Shabbat shalom. Good.
Shabbat shalom. People were scared to death. But he was crazy. He was the head of the Navy. He was a hero. He walked across South Africa fighting the Boer War.
Escaping.
Anthony Roberts. His book on his biography. He's a good friend of his. He also wrote a great biography of Stonewall. Those are his two best books. Anthony Roberts.
Read
Yeah.
Manchester.
He's a paperback. You can find it in hardcover.
I've read Manchester's and I've read Churchill's since mine.
Yeah, and those are dated compared to
Did this one?
Or I had it in my synagogue. Thank you. I had it because he had access to archives that nobody else had. His book was tremendous. So if you can get through 1,000 pages.
I got through Churchill's. I'll get through this one. Thank you.
writing.
It was so simple, Serenade.
It's not simple.
It looks so simple.
It's not simple.
Here's the names.
They make it difficult. And it shouldn't be that way.
It shouldn't be that way. So anyway,
what we want to do here is hard.
so that's the bar mitzvah list.
Yeah, and you're feeling it now. And yeah, Lauren has got the work cut out for her.
But Lauren has, she has a good,
And she won't do anything. And I'm thrilled about it.
She's
She's not going to be politically correct, and I couldn't be happier. I couldn't be happier.